OK, now, Labour peer Lord Blunkett has proposed that British values must be taught in schools, warning the UK will regret it if not. Following the summer riots and the resurgence of far-right ideologies, I said that in inverted commas, by the way, the former Education Secretary told peers that reinforcing shared values is now more crucial than ever. So we're asking, should schools teach British values? Or would that be a step backwards for our education system? Joining me now is historian and broadcaster, one of my favourite people, Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. Rafe, thank you very much for coming in. Lovely to have you in the studio. British values in school. What do you make of this one?
Well, not for the first time. Lord Blunkett is correct, but for the wrong reasons. Western values are under attack and under threat. And I say Western values because these values that they're talking about, democracy, free speech, tolerance, they apply just as much to the Swedes and the Dutch and the Canadians as they do to us. These are about Western civilized values, and they are under threat. But they're not under threat from this so-called far right. They're under threat from the far left and from radical Islam. These are mountains compared to the far right molehill. We have the most radically left-wing youth in history. We've never seen such extreme radical left-wing views being held.
What makes you say that, Rafe, by the way?
Was that?
What makes you say that we have the most radical left?
Well, all of the evidence. I've written a chapter on this, actually, on the left stranglehold over education more broadly, and it mirrors the rise of left-wing teachers as well at the same time. But, for example, more British youth think that protecting free speech is less important than not causing offence and stopping hate speech. And, of course, their definition of hate speech is so loose that it would encompass the everyday conversations of most viewers of this channel. And at the same time, of course, vast swathes of British Muslim youth hold far more extreme and intolerant and undemocratic views than even their parents or grandparents. So we do have to have a robust defence of Western values and a robust promotion. Otherwise, in the next 20 or 30 years to come, we'll be living in a dystopian future where all of these values are completely denigrated. And one of the ways I've written about this in the past, one of the things you need to do is you need to teach both citizenship classes and history classes where the long, hard struggle to the freedoms and democracy we enjoy today is taught, from Magna Carta through women's suffrage and universal suffrage, and also what happens if you lose those. So teaching about what happened behind the Iron Curtain in the communist world, referencing to Alexander Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago and so forth. And at the same time, from the ages of 10 to 16, I've also said that you need to have compulsory debates in classrooms where children have to debate from a position opposite to the one they would normally hold. That builds resilience in them, and that teaches them that opposing viewpoints do have validity. But none of this can happen if you don't actually tackle the teaching profession too, and the teacher training processes, because in the last 30 years, we've seen teaching profession go from being fairly balanced when I was at school to now over 90% of teachers vote for left-wing and centre-left parties. And a lot of that is because of the teacher training institutions, or woke madrasas, as I call them now. That's essentially, these are indoctrination camps, because teachers used to be trained in independent teacher training colleges, which worked very well. But ever since university departments of education took them over, these are the most left-wing elements of any university, we've seen the shocking rise in far left groupthink, fueled also by places like the National Education of Union, which promotes decolonizing the curriculum, and actually just recently put out a whole document about fighting fascism for its teachers.
What do you think, just quickly, Rafe, we are running out of time here. Jackie Smith, Lady Smith as she now is, she has said in response to this that schools should have some autonomy in the area. They need to be free to embed the values in a way that meets the needs of their pupils. What do you think she means by that?
Well, I'm sorry, we can't have autonomy in our teaching profession until we actually get a better balance. I'm not calling for for right-wing teaching or for left-wing teaching. We want a balance, and unfortunately, we cannot entrust the future of our democracy to a teaching profession now that teaches slanted history, because we know from white supremacy to white privilege to decolonization, these are concepts that are now being taught to our children. And too much of the focus on our children is about universities. As I like to say, when the hair is blue, there's nothing you can do. You need to focus on children in primary schools, and we need to just restore balance, because we want children to be able to make up their own minds, to be taught how to think and not what to think.
Do you think, Rafe, I mean, how do we ensure that this is being done and in the right way? Do you think there should be some sort of testing brought in, like an exam? about British values or Western values, as you would say?
No, I don't. I think those things are meaningless. I think we simply need children to understand the long, hard struggle that it took us to get to where we are, to teach respect, and actually also, in many ways, to actually engage with these ideas by debating things openly rather than feeling that they can't talk about subjects. Because we know a lot of children don't feel they can actually have an opposing viewpoint to any issue because they'll be looked down upon not just by their pupils but often by teachers. And of course, we've had more and more evidence now that students learn by osmosis. Teachers aren't necessarily being political in the classroom, but the kids can understand where their teachers lie on the political spectrum and therefore believe that they are holding the wrong viewpoint if they disagree with them.
And just very, very finally, because I do find this fascinating, and this has been raised by one... Sorry, I've lost your name now. What if parents say, I do not want my child to be taught Western British values in school and I want to withdraw my child from that class?
Well, I'm sorry, we are living in the West. We must have a robust defence of British values and of British culture, of our customs and our norms. And one of the great problems today is we have spent too long in our education system elevating minority cultures over the overarching British monoculture. And that is why we're in the position we're in. We have turned love of nation into national self-loathing. And unfortunately, our teaching profession has been at the forefront, actually, of teaching children too much about the wrongs of our past rather than celebrating our glorious history and the fact that Britain is, for example, the world's third least racist country, and yet the majority of British children believe that racism is the biggest issue, bigger than climate change. They think it's systemic racism in this country, even though we are the third least racist behind just Sweden and Brazil.